different. We're a bit different from the people you saw before, so I'll just explain you a little bit what we do. We were there also before the word crowdsourcing almost existed, 10 years, and mainly working for big corporate NGOs, GOs internally. But we've done also, referring to the presentation earlier this morning, with citizens. We did, for example, with 6,000 citizens in the Netherlands, their feedback on a tax proposal. We did the G1000 with 1,000 citizens in Belgium. But we were in this crowdsource through dialogues, to very confined moments of dialogues. Now, how does that work? The video is the best one to explain, and I hope it's working.
You have a responsibility to steer your organization, but without knowing what people are really thinking, how can you take the right actions? It's like flying blind. Wouldn't it be great to have some honest feedback straight from the source that gave you the full picture and helped you make the right decisions? Synthetron does this for you by capturing the most important authentic opinions and ideas of the people that matter to your organization via a process we call Evolutionary Crowdsourcing. Participants discuss your key subjects in a real-time conversation from the comfort of their own computers or tablets. It's as easy for them as sending an instant message or a text. We know how to get the best feedback and ideas out of a social brainstorm, and you need to include everybody who matters. Of course, lots of people generate lots of ideas and opinions, so how do you pick out the best and most useful from all the noise? Synthetron brings together up to 1,000 participants in small overlapping groups, all contributing their best ideas and most honest opinions in a safe, anonymous environment. Ideas are filtered by the participants themselves when they rank each other's comments. Synthetron uses a clever algorithm behind the scenes to allow ideas that get support in their initial group to be seen by more people. That's the moment when the statement becomes a synthetron. The stronger comments and ideas spread to a bigger audience and gather momentum, just like a really funny joke quickly spreads between friends. The conversation is done in an hour, and what do you get at the end of it? You get a short list of the strongest ideas and opinions, something that will get you thinking straight away. You also get a longer list of all the synthetrons so you can see the whole span of the conversation, and a deeper analysis of the whole discussion to turn the insights into actions. Synthetron will help you listen to your audience, engage with their thoughts and opinions, and gain feedback that enables you to make the right decisions. Synthetron, crowdsourcing insightful actions.
Yeah. Can I get back to the slides? Yeah, super. So you've seen, for us, this is actually, it's a very concentrated 1 hour, and it's sexy to say it's 1,000. Sometimes it is 1,000. Tomorrow we have it with 3,000 employees of a German company. But often it's just 30, 50, 100 people. So it doesn't have to be mass, but it's inclusive. It's the people that matter. And they're behind their PC, wherever they are. And it's like a meeting request in their agenda. And at the end, the results come out, and these are analyzed further. Which means that in the picture of the crowdsourcing, we are in this idea spectrum, but different a bit from the speakers. Today, I always say, we're not looking for who in the crowd source has a brilliant idea. We're not in co-creating with the crowd an innovative idea over time. We're actually getting the ideas of the crowd, and not by surveying them, not by asking them to predict, which are also ways that is used, but actually using dialogue. And that's a very core of the idea, and it's basically saying that you get wisdom out of dialogue. That is where we are. Now, I wanted to just tell you a few cases so that you can kind of feel like, how is this applied? And then share with you what we learned out of that, and actually what it means, how to get good intelligence out of a crowd. And I picked out cases which are very different. One is Ikea, where very operationally at the shop floor, scheduling is a very important thing. Now they realized that the scheduling was a bit a result of friendships and old relationships, and some people had like never a Saturday and never and always a Wednesday afternoon free. And they said, we'll change the whole scheduling system and we change it in an empowered way with certain principles, but the group amongst themselves have to decide how to distribute the favors. That was a very major change. And so they wanted to know how is it going, and they didn't want to hear the bosses. They wanted to hear from the people themselves. So in order to get people from the shop floor, you need to schedule them 6 weeks beforehand. So they were all were invited 6 weeks beforehand to say, you know, at that time you don't have an hour free, you go to the PC room and you chat with the other shops around. And so that's how we did that, to get the feedback of how they experience this from a very honest way. Because Synthetron, what we believe in this dialogue, that it's anonymous. It allows you to speak free up, be authentic, say whatever you want, and also review the ideas of the others in a very free way. If you do not agree, you don't offend anyone. You just say, I'm not agreeing, and it's anonymous. You don't know who's not agreeing with you. Now, out of that came that, yes, the principles they all loved, but they weren't adhered to. There were some big problems that they didn't know at management level, but they were experienced at the floor, which partly could be corrected by technicalities and partly were actually more culture. So they got the results. They immediately made their changes, and 9 months later, again, listening to them, like how we're doing now. Has this been improved? So it's part of a continuous process almost with engaging the shop floor people. And then 9 months later, it's asking the bosses of these, like say, how is it now going from your perspective? So that's an example of sensing and getting identification of problems and suggestions on solutions. This is a very different thing. RWE is a big energy company. They're our clients since a long time. And I don't know whether you know about the German market, which is, but they're actually very big in the UK as well. But they had to reinvent themselves because nuclear was suddenly out. Green energy was dominant. Every old traditional production had to be variable, so they had to just reinvent themselves. And one of the, I think, cases which is very interesting is that at the top they said, well, who are we going to be in the future? We can be like this, we can be like that, or we can become that type of company. And then they crowdsourced this with the 1,500 top managers, saying, okay, well, let's go through these 3 options. And what do you think about this option? What are the advantages and what is appealing to you? What are the challenges and the disadvantages? What do you think about the next option? Now, which option would you prefer and why? Which option do you think we can make happen? And so what is happening there is 2 things, is that management gets an incredible intelligence input of a sense of realism on the choices they're making, but also they started engaging these managers in owning that choice. So that's another example where the result is, the insight is valuable, but the process in itself is extremely valuable as well. This is, again, very different. A hospital, major hospital, who said, well, we're doing these employment surveys all the time. You know, we're measuring people, and we get these numbers, and we've been doing this now for a couple of years, 10 years or something like that. And it's tiring. We don't know anymore. It's a number that goes a bit up, a bit down, so what? And we've been with them for a while using Synthetron in a very operational way, saying, look, department by department, you just put people on the Synthetron with a few questions. Now, what's going well? What's not going well? Well, you said that these things were not going well. What can we do about it? Very simple. And so you get the instant results that are actionable for the manager of the department. So that's a very operational, and they just use it themselves. They've been trained to use it themselves very easily. And then this case, which is, it's a very interesting one because they've been a long client of us as well. And it's a major bank in Belgium, France, and they are facing this changing bank environment. And in the beginning, when we were doing, they had a strategy and they presented it the traditional way. And now you see that they have to move faster and faster, and they're actually co-creating the reorganization. So we just, with them, the case I think is interesting to see is how they did a reorganization. They said, well, in order to go for a future, we have to organize ourselves different and put different lines of focus into the market. So they just tilted their matrix, basically. And they said, well, that's what we're going to do. But how we're going to do it, well, let's find out together with the managers. So we kind of nominate managers, yeah? And we first ask like the top, the regional guys, and say, how do you see how we're going to work this out? And then we ask the guys who are a bit more local and say, how do you see we're going to work this out? And basically, en route, they're co-creating. They're co-creating also with traditional meetings, but it's only through crowdsourcing that you get a feeling of what's really going on and what are the big items that are important to address in the local meetings or that are systematic. And it allows management also to find out, like, where's the energy level? How many people are actually with us? And so that's giving you an example, very different ways of application. Each time really focused 1 hour every. Now, we talked about engagement. We all the time have 80, 90, 100% presence because it's about something for the employee that's important for them. They're there. They care. It's their future. And they know that they're co-creating, and they know that what they're going to share as feedback is actually being picked up. Now, the title I got from EPI was a bit different than Intelligent Questions, Intelligent Crowd, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing, actually, basically. What we came up with is like, okay, crowdsourcing is a way to go faster and better. I want to just say a few things. One is, I talked about it already, it's extremely engaging, but it's more than just engaging. You're having an impact. The moment that you ask the Ikea people to say, what are your problems, or is this and what can we do about it, suddenly they know, they're much more aware of the problems, but they're also aware of the solutions, and they are part of that solution. The same thing when I talked about RWA. So it's not a free lunch. When you crowdsource with a group, you make them think about something. After an hour, and just an hour, not this 1 month or 3 weeks process, they are different because they collectively created some wisdom, and they collectively also repositioned themselves. Because if you are against the project, and every time you send this message and you see it doesn't get any, it's not picked up by the others, and the ideas of the others are actually are in favor of the project, you are actually learning. You're learning what their arguments are, and you're learning which of your arguments are actually accepted and not. And so we're a strong believer in this value of dialogue. I quickly want to just, this should have gone. The traditional theory is that people are against change, yeah, and like 70% of mergers fail, and the whole theory says that, and it comes from psychology, which is like whenever you're dead, you're resistant, and you have to go to this curve and become optimistic. And that psychology thinking is into the change management, and that's what change management is about. Now, when we crowdsource change projects, it's actually very interesting, is that we qualified the ideas of this that come out of the Synthetron in the sense, what direction are they? We call it the ABC model. Are people talking in an enabling way, providing solutions? Are they talking in a blocking way, saying, hey, ho, we have a problem here? Or are they talking in what we call critical way? This is urgent, we need to address that. Now, you see the balance of energy is that 56% of what people are saying is enabling. What it means is that whenever you crowdsource, you actually are engaging people in the change, and by that definition already making them positively thinking, because they can actually influence it. But it also means that change is collective. If you would individually ask them, you wouldn't get this out. The one thing that actually comes up systematically out of our crowdsourcing is, and it's a kind of the thing that you observe in change, and we built then a model together with a professor from INSEAD on it, which is people are actually about three things when they crowdsource. They give you ideas, what they think. They give you feelings of what they observe and what they see happening. And they give practical insights. And it's these three levels of insights, it's three levels of intelligence. And you could, but it's very important that when you ever think about crowdsourcing, you have these three levels you need to think about, because the crowd has intellectual ideas, they have feelings, they observe things, they experience things. That's part of their intelligence. And the other part of the intelligence is actually on the practical stuff. And the last one, I'm not going to go along to the slide, but the last thing is that you need to go for consistency. Crowdsourcing actually, whenever the feedback is in engaging employees, is saying, hey, we're not consistent. And the crowds are very tough on observing consistency. Is it your words and your deeds and your thoughts are very different? Is it that between the head and the heart and the hand you're very different, or bottom up or top down? I'm going to quit this because I want to just quickly go to key success factors and talk to you about, well, is it then so easy? No, it isn't. And there is academia as hell about what can go wrong with crowds. Yeah, groupthink, whatever. There's a lot of books on that. And there are two things for me that actually, or for us, that really help us think about it. One is Kahneman with his thinking of front of mind and back of mind. If you haven't read the book, read at least something about it. But it basically says, well, we're thinking, we're lazy, we're using this front of mind. And we actually have to push somewhere an internal button to say, hey, let's think deeply. Now, that means that if you ask questions to the crowd, they will start with the front of mind, lazy. So you have to make sure that you ask the right questions so that they go to this back of mind. The same thing is that there is an enormous theory on what can biases that the crowd have. Yeah? And all these biases, you can look at them, all of them, they are, and they have the most funniest names that there is, they're all groupthink-like. They are basically based on the fact that people want to have, like the Italians say, bella figura. They want to go along. They don't want. So it's somewhere this lack of critical, independent thinking in a crowd that creates biases. Now that's to avoid if you crowdsource, and which means that you have to do something right. First of all, you need to know why you want to crowdsource, so that you have a very authentic, clear purpose of what you want to do, and ask the crowd to talk about. The why can be very different. The why can be just engagement. The why can say, I want to find out a solution. The why is also, what is actually success? Do I want to get money out of it? Do I want to get ideas out of it? So the why is extremely important, because otherwise you don't design it right and you're not getting the right crowd. Getting the right crowd is important in the sense that if you look at this graph, it's like you have people that have similar dialogue or very different dialogue, similar knowledge or very different knowledge. It's logic. If you put your experts together, that's deep dialogue. If you put people together, have different experience and different dialogues, they start chit-chatting. That's the trap you have to avoid. And as you said earlier, you don't put the people that do the flight Miami-London together with London-Johannesburg. They would chit-chat because they have not the same context or at that level, operational level of information. And Aristotle is there because strong believer in the dialogue value of that. Now, not getting only knowing why, getting the right crowd, also getting the right questions. And you heard that before when I talked about the traps that are there. The one thing is to avoid ambiguous questions. Oh, my slide didn't go, but okay. I can actually, this is just an example, is I can ask the first question, say, what do you expect of the crowdsourced energy market, which is this new idea of a crowdsourced energy market? And you can give an answer. But if I say the question, hey, to become 30% of the energy market, you have to think differently. Over the next 5 years, you have to think differently. So get it right and get your questions clear is extremely important. Now, oh, well, this should have been the other way around, okay? That's, the other thing is, get your questions right in front of this reflex in front of it. And I'm giving a few examples here. We could say, how satisfied are you about Crowdsource Weekly? Well, we're going to just quickly say, did I like it? You can say, was it good? Well, maybe you say, well, did I enjoy myself? Which is already a deeper level of thinking. What was really good? Now I have to start evaluate, classify, prioritize a bit. What did I learn? Oof, it's a second level of thinking. I have to compare. And then what will you do differently? I now have to translate it and apply. So you see that depending on where you are with your question, you trigger something very different. And you trigger something which goes from my quick reflex mind to my deeper reflecting brain. So that's actually one of the things that's very important, that get the questions right. I'm going to skip maybe also this, but also get the questions right in the way you say them. Above is what a client of us say. Oh, I want to know this. I want to ask this question to a client, to our employees. What is engagement for you as employees? Now, if you get that, you start philosophizing and blah, blah, blah. You're not getting the answers. If you actually ask them, what gets you out of bed in the morning to come to work, it's different thinking. So it's very important that your questions are powerful, that they touch heart, head, and hands, that they are not boring, that you actually engage people with a question and not pull them off. And then there is a right level of listening. Because one thing is crowdsourcing, and then you get all this source data. Now, our data is two types. If we have 100 people discussing, they probably have 2,000 ideas or something like that. Out of these 2,000, a few will be top ideas. Now, that you can then actually go, and it's called grounded theory, very deep listening and say, what is systematic in there? What are they really saying? So that you actually respect what they're saying, but also what is coming up systematically in quantitative terms, so that you have respect also their valuation. Because one thing is crowdsourcing, but if you then do not respect the sources or the info that they're giving, you actually are shooting in your own foot. And I'm going to maybe say the second thing is you can only say what are people saying, you can also say how are people saying it, and find out from the language way of talking, what is their contextual mindset. I can be problem-oriented or goal-oriented, whatever. This is a whole model which is language and behavior-based, which allows you then also to know how to communicate to the crowd. And this is the last one, respect. Get the right crowd, get the right questions, get the right listening, and do it in a respectful way. And I would almost end with this, which means that crowdsourcing, it's not a decision-making tool in organizations. It's an input tool. It's an engagement tool, but it's not a decision-making tool, and it's not a free lunch. The moment you did it, like Ikea's example, you have to follow up. You have to really do something with the results that they gave. And then that's just a recap, I think, which I'm going to quit for to saying, I think, and it's maybe in line with Epi said before, at the moment, we were changing, organizations are all changing, and we're all talking about empowerment, and we're all talking about delayering, and we're all talking about new organizations and virtual teams and the whole lot. But it's still little groups of people based, and there is an enormous potential in actually crowdsourcing within organizations, but also outside. But I believe it needs to be done very, very well. And what we experienced that if you make a mistake on one of these things, it's horrifying because you get a disengaged crowd or you get the wrong answers, which are not useful for management or the client to follow up. So it is actually that you need something that you need to learn. And we spent 10 years doing this. So.